More than almost anything else, I get questions from my subscribers about how to preach without notes, or at least how to break away from a manuscript and be a little bit more free in your presentation. In this video, I want to give you 3 tips to break away from that manuscript and start preaching freely without being tied to the notes. My name's Lane, this is Preaching Donkey. I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to put something free in your hands that will be a great complement to this video. It's my free 21-day guide to creating killer sermons. If you go to preachingdonkey.com/21days, you can pick up your guide there or just click on this link. What people want to know more than almost anything else is, how do I preach without notes, or some version of that? It's either how do I preach without notes, or how do I preach with less notes, or how do I make sure that I'm not always tied to my manuscript because I want to break away from it and be free. And I totally get this. I think as a preacher, it's really important to be able to make eye contact with your listeners. For example, when I look at this lens, I'm making eye contact with you, right? But if I were to turn away and look at notes, right? Just imagine that there's notes on my hand. There's not, but let's just say there were. If I'm looking at my notes, guess who I'm not making contact with? And if I were to give this whole video, this whole presentation, looking at the notes and occasionally looking up at you, it looks like I'm not really focused on you, I'm focused on my notes. And most pastors, understandably, don't want to be tied to their notes. I want to give you 3 practical ways that you can begin to break away from a dependency on notes and be able to make eye contact with your listeners more, so that you're engaging them with your full person, your full body, your full personality is being brought to bear, and you're not staring at notes. Sound good? Number 1, the first thing that you want to do is, in your preparation, begin reducing the amount of notes that you allow yourself when you preach. Here's what I mean. Let's say that right now you're used to a full manuscript in front of you that you read verbatim. I would not suggest getting rid of that and making a bulleted format right now. I just wouldn't suggest doing that. Rather, what I would do is I would look at that manuscript, and let's say it's 4 pages typed out. Could you get it to 3 pages? Could you reduce some areas? Could you summarize some areas? Could you bullet out some of it while leaving other parts of it more paragraph style? And could you get it to 3 pages and preach that way for a few sermons, maybe 4, maybe 5 sermons? Once you get used to that, go down to 2 pages and then 1 page. Once you get to 1 page, what you have done at this point is you've taken a full manuscript and you've reduced it to what has to be a more bulleted format. Now, I want to talk about that 1 page of notes. I use a combination of what I call triggers and summaries. I want to see a word or a phrase, and I want it to trigger in my mind exactly the thought, exactly the point, exactly the idea that I'm trying to communicate in that moment. And then I want a summary to follow over a couple of lines that helps me, in case I need it, to look at that trigger. That's usually all it takes. In fact, most of the time I don't even have to do that because I've internalized my message well enough where I don't have to look at that trigger or that summary. But if I do, the trigger is normally enough. If it's not, the summary is all it takes. And to read that, and the reason why I'm looking down here is I don't actually have my notes right in front of me. I have them beside me on a tall table, and I'm kind of right here. And so when I glance at my notes, it's as simple as I'm looking at people, I glance at my notes. Looking at people, I'm looking at people, glance at my notes. And it's a natural thing. And so I've got my trigger and my summary right here, and I'm able to see it. So what I would do is I would say, what do you have to do to get your sermon on 1 page where it's glanceable? You can see it, you can look at it, it's 1 word, it's 1 thought, it's 1 idea. It's enough where you're not left stranded on an island, right? Where you're out there going, oh gosh, what did I do? I don't know what I'm supposed to say. But it's not so much where you could fit it all on 1 page. So number 1 is get it to 1 page. Number 2, internalize your message. Internalize. Now, I did not say memorize. The tendency, if you're moving from manuscripts to bullets, is to want to memorize. To say, well, if I'm going to use bullets, I'm going to memorize it because I would have memorized basically my manuscript, but I would have read through it. So what you want to do is don't try to memorize it, but internalize it. Carey Nieuwhof says it this way: don't focus on memorizing your message, focus on understanding your message. When you understand it, when you internalize it, when it's inside of you, when you don't have a message, but the message has you, you're able at that point to do some damage in a good way. Because at that point, you're not just reading words off of a page, but you're able to flow freely because you have internalized it. So the way you internalize it is really good, thorough preparation. Work with your notes and then rehearse it. Say the words that you're going to say. Say them exactly how you're going to say them, and say them in the room that you plan to say them in if you have access. And do this long enough to where, and by the way, practice without referencing the notes as much as you can. Don't look at the notes. Maybe the first time you have to look at them a lot more, the second time a little less, the third time a little less. If you really want to do this, this is a lot of work, but if you really want to get to the point where you don't have the manuscript in your way, this is kind of what you have to do, is internalize it. And once you do this with 4, 5, 6, 7 messages, it becomes more natural when you prepare to do the things to internalize your message. So the first thing we're going to do is reduce our notes to 1 page. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to internalize, not memorize, but internalize our message. And then number 3, and finally, we are going to get some kind of on-stage visual cue. Now, here's what I like. I like a TV that's right here. Big, fat, huge, 55-inch monitor that everybody can see, and I can see, and I can point to my notes. This is a game changer. When you can simply look at your notes and say, you know, it's kind of like what Paul said in 1 Corinthians, and you point, boom, 1 Corinthians pops up. Okay? It's kind of like, you know, this point right here, boom. It is such an amazing tool, because if you have this and you have the triggers and summaries and you've internalized your message, then you get up there and you flow freely, and this is a little bit of a stop block, because as long as you have this, you're not going to fall on your face, because the very next point that's coming is going to pop right up. In our system, we point and the media person pushes the button and it advances the slide. In another church, I advanced my own slides. It doesn't really matter how you do it. The point is that you've got the TV there and the verses or the points pop right up for you. So those are my 3 things. Even if you can only do 2 out of 3, for example, if you don't have the TV and you can't get the TV, that's fine. You can still do number 1 and number 2. If you don't want to reduce your notes, you can always internalize. But if you do all 3, it packs a really tight punch. And I'm telling you, after 4, 5, 6, 7 sermons of doing this process, you're going to have way less dependency on a manuscript. It's going to be way more natural to preach with limited notes, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So let me know what you think. Right here is a playlist about how to write a sermon in 7 steps. I'd love for you to check it out. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. Let me know in the comments, how much do you put on your notes that are in front of you? I'd love to know. So I wanted to address this. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video.